You're listening to a Keokuk Area History Syndicate production.
We're here with Dave Jones and Gordy Blankenship for part 2 of our interview about the history of racing in Keokuk. How are you doing today?
I'm doing okay. Before I start, I want to kind of clarify something that my wife had said, after I got home, that in the scrapbook talks about my era, but my era pretty much covers all of us, of the main Keokuk national champions. I'm, of course, a little younger than them, but I started pretty young, but we're covering from the mid-50s to the early 80s. And that pretty much covers Don and Ernie, which were the pioneers of all of it. And then Ramo and Dick Hutcherson started in the mid-50s here at the Keokuk track. And then my brother and I raced here, and then Mike Durr, he just run in IMCA. But I want to make sure that pretty much covers it. So if I sound like I'm talking about myself, I'm really talking about all of us.
You're kind of the voice of everybody now, Gordy. You're here with the memories, and the memories you have. Unfortunately, we've lost with some of the other drivers.
Yes. My brother is still with us. He's my much older brother. He's a year and a half older than I am. But I've been blessed with a pretty good memory, and then a lot of it, my daughter did this scrapbook, and it covers from when we were kids all the way through my circuit racing, which was in USAC and ARCA at the end.
Can you help, for those of us who are unfamiliar with the racing lingo, can you help us with understanding ICA and all of the abbreviations for the racing track and the...
Well, pretty much all of the guys here started in IMCA, International Motor Contest Association. And then there was USAC, United States Auto Club, then ARCA, Automobile Racing
Club of
America.
So what's the difference between those and NASCAR, or is there a difference?
Well, actually, at one time, IMCA was actually bigger than NASCAR. And NASCAR was starting just a little later, but after the war, these racetracks just broke out everywhere, and they, cornfields or wherever, people were home, and America was getting started again. And then they broke out, and but back in the day, we pretty much everybody ran the county fairs. There was no weekly programs and stuff like there is today. And the weekly programs pretty much put a lot of the circuit racing out like we did.
Yeah.
We used to run mostly the county fairs and stuff.
So do you think that the war left the men that had served with just an itch for an adrenaline rush, or maybe just wanting to work with their hands? And
No, I think it was an adrenaline rush.
yeah.
Everybody's excited to get home. America was booming again. And fortunately, the women all went to work, and they kept the country going while the men were off at war. And, of course, I'm a war baby. I was born in 46, and that's about the time the baby boom started.
Were there any women racers?
Well, back in our day, there was a couple, but they traveled around with their cars, but I wouldn't call them racers. But there are a few pretty good women racers. But, the thing that stands out is, there's 100 men or 200 men to one woman.
Yeah.
So it makes it, her odds of winning are a lot less than the guys are.
Right.
I could be wrong, but I think the only NASCAR female I can remember back in like the 50s was Sarah Christian, I think was her name. She raced NASCAR.
Sarah Fisher.
No, this is way before her.
No, I don't remember that name.
Don't remember her name.
There was another woman.
Sarah Fisher drove Indy cars,
Yes,
but this
yes.
was like in the 60s. Sarah Christian drove, and the pictures I've seen of her, she was a pretty, I won't say big lady, but she was burly looking. That's for
She was
for
a
sure.
force,
But she was kind of the first, I think, pioneer women.
Yeah, I
NASCAR.
remember seeing a picture of that woman, but the name doesn't seem like it fits the picture in my mind. But I'm sure you would know, Dave.
So, picking up from last time, our last first part, we were talking about you getting exposed to racing, right? Growing up on that, across from the track, kind of helping out, and then starting your first race when you were 13.
Yes.
And then winning your first race when you were 17.
I won my first race when I was 14.
Oh, I'm glad that we've clarified this.
Yes.
Winning your first race when you were 14, and then having a little bit of a hard time with the folks around here just accepting how great you were, right? You said you had a rough time from the other racers. And then it was after the war that you came back and you started racing in tracks that were unfamiliar, and then gaining the respect of not just those folks, but then also the community as a real bona fide racer.
Yeah, when I got home from the service in 1969, I started running, and I ran some IMCA races, and I was talked about pretty quick because I ran pretty good right out of the box, and but I didn't win my first IMCA feature till 1973. We were up to, I'd run, 72. I had run third in the 300 lapper at Des Moines. I was leading it, and I run over something on the racetrack. I was just ready to lap Fred Horn, and Fred Horn ended up winning the race, but I cut 2 tires down on the straightaway and right by the pits, and I had to go around the racetrack on 2 flat tires, and we were 3 laps down when we got the tires fixed, and then I ended up a lap down in 3rd place. But I would have won that 300 had I not cut the tires down. And then the next week we ran up at it's where I won my first race. Anyway, I broke all the track records up there, and when it was over, my wife was 6 months pregnant, and she was trying to climb the fence to get over there with the excitement, of
Winning the race?
Yeah, winning. And I was leading that thing, and I got lapping a car and got put into, they had a concrete wall kind of like Donaldson in front of the grandstand there, and I hit it, and I broke something in the steering, and I just still remember this, of just kind of sitting back in the car again and feeling, and says, man, I can still win this thing. And by then, Herb Janey was on my bumper, and we ran the last 50 laps pretty much side by side, but I ended up winning. And, of course, we were excited, super excited.
Can you tell me about your pit crew, how you met, what that was like, the dynamic of your team?
Well, Jim Billings, I met him when I got out of the Army, and Jim was the guy that went to pretty much all the races. Then the guys would just show up, and they'd come over and help. We didn't change tires unless we had a flat. It's not like changing every 20 laps down in NASCAR. But all we did was put gas in, so all you needed was somebody to throw gas in the thing. And
tires were a lot harder back then, weren't they?
Yeah, and but I noticed, like the other day, tires were really wearing good in this, there in Nashville. They run 100 laps on that set of tires, which is a lot down there.
Absolutely, yeah.
And they didn't fall off. When you talk about fall off, it means that if you're going 23 seconds one lap and you don't go to 24, that's fall off. That's going longer to get around. Your speed falls off when they talk about fall off at a race. But it was really quite a race. But
the tires have changed so much because back then they were bias plies, weren't they? They didn't.
Well,
they weren't.
we didn't run hardly any radios.
They didn't have radios back then, so all the tires were bias ply.
Well, we run some radios a couple of times, but it was really funny because the car was kind of wallowed around on them to get used to it. In fact, Dale Earnhardt never could get used to the radio tires. And
Can you tell me more about that, radio versus bias?
well, bias is just a straight wall tire, and a radial tire is made to flex like that. That's why when you go out there and look, like on my van, looks like all the tires are low, and they still have 35 pounds of air in them, but they just look low, and the sidewalls of the tire are a lot more flexible.
I see.
A bias ply tire would actually grow up and down a little easier. A radial tire has a metal band in it that kind of keeps it from growing, doesn't it? And what happens is, as it takes air, as you're racing, it takes air, it turns harder because it can't grow.
Well, another thing is, I think that they absorb the heat a lot more. A lot of tires that blew out on the highways were running a little bit low on air pressure, and if those sidewalls got flexing on a hot day, the tire would blow out. And this pretty much did away with a lot of that.
It's dangerous.
In fact, most of it, yeah.
Wow. So how many members were there in your crew?
Well, sometimes there'd be 4 or 5, and sometimes there was a couple of us. Jim Billings and I went to a lot of races, in that old truck, just he and I. And then, of course, when I got married, my father-in-law was really good, and he went to all the races for several years. And then along in the mid to late 80s, or early 80s there, we were just getting worn out. And when you run like 23 circuit races in the summer and you're doing all your own engines yourself and keeping the car up, it takes its toll. But my wife kills me when I tell the story, but when we first married, we had this old truck that Dick Hutcherson had, and he had Gary Harrison's dad had put a Pontiac engine in it, and you sat above the motor, but we were up on the Highway 78 at that stop sign getting on 63, and I looked over, and my wife had stripped down to her underwear because it was so hot in that truck. And I'm going to tell you something, she looked hot.
You did still make it to the race?
Oh, yeah. It was daytime.
I've been feeling that way the last couple of weeks here. It's been hot.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the summer, but one day we run a 200 lapper in Des Moines. It was 105 out. And I felt bad for the crew because I was in the car. The temperature in the car was probably 125.
Oh, my gosh.
But I was in the shade. They were out in the sun. Yeah.
On that blacktop, it's hot.
Well, we were on dirt then, but the Des Moines was black dirt. And it was
so sad that track's gone. I got so many memories up there of the Iowa State Fairgrounds track, and so sad there's not a racetrack there anymore.
Can I switch gears and ask about your family? Tell me about how you met your wife. You had mentioned that your father-in-law was a racer.
No.
Oh, he wasn't.
No, he just loved. He started helping on the car.
Okay.
And just fell in love with racing.
Got it. Okay.
So
tell me how you met your wife, and then tell me about your kids and.
Well, actually, I met my wife. My sister-in-law knew her. She had gone with a guy, and she was had broken up, and I'd gone with a girl before I went into the Army, and I got a Dear John, which tells you how stupid she is. My name's not even John. But anyway, she lined us up, and we went out one night, and she, just kind of slow start, but we met, and 6 months later we got married, and then our first child, our daughter, was born a year and a half after we were married, and then our son was born 2 years later.
Your daughter is the one that was
She did
being
this
carried
scrapbook.
while your wife jumped over the fence.
She was in her mom, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Is your wife?
She didn't know anything about that race.
No, I'm sure not. Is your wife from Keokuk also?
Yes. She was a Rose, Linda Rose, and her dad and two brothers owned Rose Brothers Construction. And she worked there in the office. And she was a pretty thing, still is. And she had long hair and stuff. But anyway, we just pretty much hit it off. And she bowled 3 nights a week, and I'd never bowled before, so we went bowling one afternoon in Quincy, and she wasn't real happy because I rolled 176 first game. Took 2 years to roll that good again, but I
luck.
beat her.
Wow.
And but she was a pretty good bowler. But anyway, we met, and then she didn't like traveling at the time, but then she really did it. But I'm gonna tell you something. She's one of the reasons we were able to race like we did. But I watch her sometimes, packing the old bus. One of the hardest workers you'd ever see, and still is. In the early 70s, and still worked the tail off of most teenagers.
How long did you guys have the bus?
We 73 till 84,
Right.
11 years. Probably 300 to 400,000 miles we put on that thing.
Whatever happened to that thing?
Well, we ended up, the motor went out, and I had another motor, but by then, it was getting a little tired. And so ended up selling it to somebody that's cutting up scrap for $200, and he never did pay me. I don't even know his name, but that's your material.
Did your children travel with you when you were racing?
Pardon me?
Did your children come with you when you were racing?
We didn't take them very often. We, in 81, we went to Daytona and took kind of a family vacation, and the kids went with us. But Linda's mom stayed home and watched the kids, and which was good because we were able just we did things going, like we'd stop up in the Dells and do things sometimes, and but. It pretty much once we got to the racetrack, it was all business for the guys. And Linda and a friend of hers, we had mopeds bolted on the front of the trailer, and they'd take off over into the fairs and stuff. And it was good for everybody, really.
So how many kids did you have in total?
2. That's one boy, one girl. That's 2.
Your daughter and your son. Got it. I wanted to make sure I didn't cut you off.
No.
Okay. So how did your racing, how did it impact them? Are they interested in racing, or did they start racing themselves?
Actually, my daughter, she did the scrapbook, and she didn't know much about racing till we did the scrapbook, and brought whole new life to her. And my son, we built a 4-cylinder run at Donaldson, and I think he didn't win till his 3rd night out. And these guys had been. We built that car in 2005, so he'd have been 30 years old. He was born in 75. And he did it, and he won the track championship in Donaldson in 2006. And we ran 20 heat races that summer, and then when you won, you had to start in the rear. So I had to start in the rear every night, and he won 19 out of 20. And burned a wheel bearing out in the other one. The car was pretty fast. And all the guys got to whining and crying stuff because, I was supposedly building the car, but it's Gordon Jr. And it's Gordy Jr. He worked on the car and stuff too. But after 2007, just kind of the fun was gone because everybody was just really whining about it, and because we were running so good, and I was putting my motor back together in 2006. It had 3 pistons in it, and it's still sitting on the motor stand with 3 pistons in it, because I was having so much fun. I was having fun with the boy, and more fun than me racing, and I just never did get back together. Now, I've been thinking about putting it together. My wife says I'm not, but that doesn't mean anything.
So, my question is, when did the racing in this area start to peter out? Like 2006 isn't, well, in my mind, it's not that long ago. Is it still as vibrant as it was, or what's happened?
Well, for us guys, circuit racing, like my car was outlawed.
That's right. You're too fast.
Well, I was outlawed from that, but ARCA had a 440 cubic inch limit on motor size, but then they went to 350 cubic inch. And that's a whole new ball game, and it took 5 times as much money to put a good small block. Small block is 350 inches compared to the big blocks there. And I didn't have the money, and I was worn out. So we quit until 99. I put the old car kind of back together, but never did run good till the last night I ran it. And the motor went out, but I was leading, pulling away, because I'd figured out the problem. I had a problem with the brake system in it, and once I figured it out, the car was fast. But then we, like I said, we were running the 4-cylinder and was having too much fun.
So the decline of racing in the area, is part of it the cost? Is part of it just that the marketing?
No, it'd just be starting over, basically.
Yeah, because
and when you're 50 years old or a little more, you just different things. And I had a business going that had me tied up a lot more than I would liked.
Yeah.
And I mean, a lot of 100-hour weeks. Yeah. And
right.
Wears you out.
So my question, I guess, is less about you and more about like the community. How come there aren't any new Keokuk racers that are taking over?
There is a lot of guys that are racing like Donaldson and stuff, but it's completely different.
Okay.
There's no. There was some circuit racing. In fact, IMCA was a little bit, but it was different. Like the champion would say win 15 races in Donaldson, and maybe be good at another track. He might win 30 races, whereas we ran 30 different racetracks to get 30.
Yeah.
So that's the big difference now. But no, there's lots of guys here in town still racing.
It's a lot.
But nobody on a national circuit.
It's really a lot. I won't say it's easier now than it was for you guys, like you were saying, because in this area now, on Friday night, you have CJ Speedway in Columbus Junction. On Saturday night, you have Burlington and Donaldson. And then on Sunday, there's a track at Quincy that races. So you can actually, it's easier now than it was back there for you guys. You didn't have all those close tracks.
No, and then you go and you run 20-lap race on your engines, where we might run 300 laps. So about 1,000 laps on a motor was a lot of laps.
Yeah.
And it takes a long time for them to get that many laps, when you're running 20 or 30 laps a night. But when you run 300 here and maybe 200 somewhere the next day, they go up pretty fast. In fact, in 72, we ran 2 races in Austin, Minnesota. Then we went over to Wausau, Wisconsin, and ran 2 more races. And then we came home, and my air cleaner had come loose and had to redo the motor. And I caught my finger in a chain hoist here and smashed it down, and I couldn't get it out because it had run somebody had run the cable up too far, and I had to take a pin out standing up on the roll bars of the front bars of the race car. And when I put the pin out, I made it go and it went the wrong way, sucked my finger right up into it.
Ugh.
And I even tried pulling my finger off, because I couldn't get it to go backwards. And finally, luckily Jim Billings was out there and was able to take another piece out to get my finger out. But anyway.
You still have your finger, though.
Huh?
You still have this finger.
Yeah, but it's cold all the time, even like right now. And in wintertime it gets real cold. But anyway, we ran 200 lapper. I got the motor together and we ran 200 laps that Sunday. And that Saturday in Des Moines, and we were supposed to run the next day in Sedalia. And that's the first race I ever missed because of injury, because I just couldn't do it. I said, I got to go home. My finger was hurting that bad. And we run the rest of the summer, but I could feel every bump in the road traveling in this finger,
Yeah.
No power steering in any of those cars,
No,
right?
Gosh.
A little tougher to steer.
So what caused the Keokuk racetrack to close down?
We closed down different times. It's probably a lot to do with the river. A lot of people went out on the river in boats and stuff. A lot more back in the day. And just the crowds just never really grew out there. And you would think, with all of the guys and stuff coming out of here, but it just never really had the crowds you would think might have been.
So it just didn't make sense economically to keep it going if there was Donaldson. Okay.
How long was
And
it?
a lot of cars.
How long was it between Sportsman's Park close and the Lee County Speedway start? Was it quite a few years there?
Seems like the track closed down one year at the end of 61, maybe somewhere along in there. Then it reopened a little while, and then 65 or 60s, yeah. This is back in the 50s. So Lee County took over, I'm thinking 60. I went over there and raced in 73. There was Lee County Speedway there. They had an old-timers race. And I drove somebody's car.
Remember that?
Yeah, I put a whipping on him. McCready was running too, Jerry, and stuff. But I won that by quite a little bit. But I just come back from running third in a 500-miler in Texas, so we were kind of riding high anyway.
So many of the tracks around back then were half-mile tracks, and boy, a lot of those have been chopped down to 3/8, haven't they?
Yeah, but that was a quarter mile out here. But by then I was circuit racing, so we weren't running hardly any dirt. The only dirt we were running was Springfield Mile and DuQuoin. And I think it was a couple other little tracks popped up here and there. We ran Knoxville a couple times and actually ran a couple races in Des Moines. But other than that, there wasn't much dirt. But the super speedways, it's kind of unreal. Like I said, you're running 200. We were averaging 205 around Talladega, and it rolled up, the car behind me, and then you actually roll out of the throttle a little bit because the draft is taking you along. And people don't understand, like Joey Logano run back in the back for a long time of the race the other day, and they didn't have the horsepower because the more horsepower you got, the more fuel you're burning. That's period. And he's sitting back there, and that's why he had a lot of gas left to survive 5 races. I mean, with 31 extra laps down there.
So I know racing is a lot more than just having a fast car. There's some strategy involved. Would you mind sharing some of your strategies or your go-to things? Some people, I don't know if they're kind of waiting or being in the middle of the pack, or you said, towards the rear and then shooting up towards the end. What was your strategy?
Well, my strategy was to go pretty much as hard as I could go, as long as I could go.
Okay, fair enough.
But you kind of get in a groove and stuff. But, today, and racing's changed a lot down in NASCAR, because those guys are on the gas all day. There is no getting in a routine or nothing, because somebody's running as fast as they can go all day. And it's pretty incredible how tough them cars and stuff are and stuff. But, no, they used to call it stroking it. You just get in there, get in kind of a groove and just ride and stuff. But I know, like we were running in Oklahoma City, and Mike Durr and I, we were running side by side, and we run that way for 100 laps. And Joe Wallace was ahead of us just a little bit. He won the race. And Mike beat me by maybe 3 foot. But we run side by side for 100 laps, no cautions. And that was the same way when we won our first race up in Cresco, Iowa. That's where we won the first time. Say, run 100 laps wide, just as fast as you can go. And no break. But these guys are real athletes. They really are. People don't think so, but you got to be tough to.
Oh, I'm sure your neck
Absolutely.
alone has to be able to, and your reflexes have to be incredible.
Yeah, you had to have a lot of upper body strength. Basically, we didn't have power steering.
Yeah, and you guys didn't have the head restraints or that.
No.
The cars today, they can't hardly move their head. Back then, they didn't have any of that.
Yeah, when we first raced, a lot of the guys didn't have anything on their sides. You hung on by the steering wheel. And I went over to Milwaukee after we'd run third in Texas, and 11 laps in, my steering wheel broke from, kind of pull. And we didn't have the same deal. We had a little bit of something, but you still pulled on that wheel, and it broke the steering wheel. And then when they got seats, they got some armrest built right in them now. But the ones now got the headrests and everything. Those seats are probably $3,000 in the race cars today.
That does lead me to ask, when you were constructing your cars, did you build in any extra safety measures? Or the car was the car?
No, you did this, but you talk about this. When I worked over at Nichols Engineering and stuff, they built the cars, but and put them on the stand and we roll them over. And when we built my car in 670, we put it on a thing and we rolled it over. And I noticed in the floorboard right under my feet was pretty much an opening with nothing there. And I put an extra bar in that car than none of the rest of them did. And it's probably why I still have both my feet, because I lost it. And somebody had crashed through the guardrail down at I-70 Speedway. And then later on, I spun and got the car straight and hit that guardrail. And it hit right down there where that bar was and rocked the car up. Otherwise, it would have ripped right up into the car. And I had on moccasins.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, yeah, they didn't make you.
No.
There was no safety equipment rules.
I had on blue jeans and a T-shirt
Oh
and
my
moccasins. And but had I not put that bar in there, I would imagine I probably would have really did some damage to my left foot. So,
Wow.
but I just look at it and think, man, I'm putting a bar down there, and I'm sure that, and it hit that bar and then sent the car up over the rail and back out. But like I said, I feel really lucky that I still have both feet.
Yeah. Dave, I see you have some things written down. Do you have questions?
Just a few. I know, Gordy, through all the years you raced, you sure have maybe rivalries with some people.
This is a good question.
But you also make some friendships, don't you? Can you kind of tell us a little bit about both sides, some of the people that you seem to always, sometimes, it's funny, racers always seem to end up being around another racer, and the next thing you know, there's a competition between them.
Yeah.
But there's sure a lot of friendships made, isn't there?
Yeah, there is, but I really don't really remember any really rivalries, I pretty much just went to race, and I still remember talking to a guy over to Memphis, Missouri one day, at the races, this before I went into the Army. I was 18 or 19, and he said something about, being competitive, and he said to me, he says, "You'd even race somebody in a wheelbarrow, wouldn't you?" Yeah, it's just competition, and that's what it was all about. And the one thing that they do today, they do a lot of blocking. Back then, you didn't do that. If you did that, somebody'd dump you. Mm-hmm. When you say dump you, that's come up and would spin you out.
Okay.
And but as far as rivalries. Now, one thing that did set us apart was I think we talked about this last week. In 78, I put Jesus Saves on the side of my race car. And that changed the perspective a lot, because I remember talking to one of the racers over in Milwaukee sitting there, and he asked me what my name was. And I told him, and he said, "Oh my," he said, "I thought you'd be some kind of Jesus freak." Because I had Jesus Saves on the side of the race car. And just one of the guys that Jesus said, "I want you to do this." And then in, I think it was, would have been 83, I come across the river, and the Christian bookstore down there had the rainbow thing with Jesus is the Lord in the middle of it. And I thought, man, I think he says that would look good on your car. So that's what we did in the last couple years we run. I had Jesus as Lord on the car. But that set us apart a little bit different from the rest of the racers, because of me, per se, being religious, which we all should be, but we all are not. But the hardest thing for me, like I said last week, was having to quit, because I felt like I was letting him down. But a little later on, I knew that he was okay. He had to be okay, or he had made a way to do it. But there was no way for me to do it at the time. And then when we built the four-cylinder, we had... the Omni had Jesus is Lord on it. And then when I built my Duster, it had Jesus is Lord on the side of it. And I still have both those cars, and they both have Jesus is Lord on them.
You'd mentioned Fred Horn earlier, and I had a chance to interview Fred Horn this past winter, and which was a lot of fun. And you could still feel he told me a few stories about a few times that he beat some of the Keokuk drivers, and you could just tell how much the Keokuk drivers meant to him. Maybe back then the rivalry was pretty heavy, but now to talk to him, he really has a lot of respect for the people that came from Keokuk, and of course you mentioned Irv, John Janey and them, but
well, all of them ended up, Irv and Fred both ended up buying. Fred Horn bought one of Ramos' cars, was Nichols' car for a minute, and Irv Janey bought one of Ernie Durr's cars. So those cars out of Keokuk went to Cedar Rapids area. But the funny thing about Fred, I saw Fred one night, and he didn't recognize me, and I almost didn't recognize him, except I knew he was up there. But first time we basically run blacktop, went down to Shreveport, and the last lap, Fred must have got a little out of shape or something, because I got into him a little bit and beat him to the flag. He wasn't a really happy camper.
I'm sure he wasn't.
Yeah, I run third, pretty much my first time on blacktop. And Actually, that's not true because we run a race up in St. Paul, and I unloaded and went out on the racetrack, and I was sideways, and the tires are smoking, and smoking coming up in the car. I thought, man, I got to do something about the smoke in the car, because it was getting built up bad. When I got in there, the officials come over and told me to get my car handling or load it up and take it home. Because I was running sideways on blacktop. You just don't do that. Well, you're not supposed to do that. But anyway, that's where all the smoke was coming from and stuff. But I didn't run any good up there. By the time we went to Shreveport, I was running pretty good by then. But yeah, Fred wasn't real happy about that.
And Fred's grandson, C.J. Horn, he races at the Lee County Speedway
Cool.
currently. He was the late model track champion last year, which was Fred Horn's grandson. And Fred's there. Not all the time, but quite a bit.
Well, pretty much every week, I think.
Yeah, the family's got a love for racing, that's for sure.
I did not realize that CJ's dad was Fred's second boy, because when we quit racing, Fred had one boy who's about 9, and that was it. So somewhere along the other, he got to mess around or something.
Tell us, I had a couple other questions. We hadn't talked to him about road courses. Did you run much road course race, or did you run any?
The only time we did, we went to Wentzville once, and they, I tried to make an oil pan, to work down there, and evidently it didn't work because about 4 laps in, the oil pressure went away, But and I remember Ramo coming over to me after a hot lap down there, and he said, "You got the whole car going pretty good," which made me feel pretty good because I'd never been on a road course, and we qualified halfway mid-pack, but Wentzville, you come around and almost a 90-degree curve, come around and then down this long hill and a long straightaway. You might be running 150 mile an hour down that straightaway. And at the end of that straightaway is another tight turn. And if you don't go that, there's trees. And I think it was Bay Darnell, they said, spun backwards down through those trees and didn't hit nothing. But you hit one of those trees under 150 mile an hour, you'd be dead.
Yeah.
So I was okay, to be honest with you, not running it.
So different, when you run an oval, you're turning left all the time. To go around a road course where you're going left, right, like he said, different angles, up, downhill, a real challenge.
And the thing about it is those guys, by then, all had good disc brakes. I still had drum brakes, which stopped the car about 50% of what the disc brakes did. So they would slow it a little bit, but that was about it. So that was the only one that was on the circuit. But I was really pretty much okay that the motor went away. Let's put it that way.
Tell us how much.
I'm not smart enough to be scared. You just do it. And but when you get back and think about it, a lot of times you think, boy, that wasn't too clever.
Tell us how much Springfield and DuQuoin meant to the racers around here.
Well, of course, I loved it because I ran good at both of those. And the last time we ran next to last time we run DuQuoin, I got out in front and was just running away with it. And I had the motor apart and the dry sump, and they had a little bolt holding a screen in there that had a self-locking nut on it. I had never had that nut off ever. And that I was having trouble with the dry sump, and I took the screens off of they had 2 pickups in there, to pick up the oil to send it back to the tank. And that nut come off and went up into the dry sump pump, twisted the shaft off. And of course, all the oil went in the motor. I come off turn 4 and actually saw the gauge drop. and I hit the key right away and coasted all the way around that mile track back to the pits. That's how the air gets to flowing around those racetracks once you get going. We coasted 1 mile on dirt all the way back to pits, and it's still probably going 25 miles an hour.
Which one do you think was the most difficult?
Yeah, they both were really difficult. DuQuoin was a little different because turn 1, and it was almost just like a little straightaway between turn 1 and turn 2, whereas 3 and 4 went around. But I accidentally got in there and hit the throttle and cocked the car sideways a little bit, which halfway scared me the first time. But I thought, man, that's what you got to do. So once I did that, I started doing that every lap, and I just started passing cars right and left. And only a couple guys figured that out, and you had to really time it right and stuff. But and on dirt, if you got out of the groove into what they call crumbs, the loose dirt that gets out there, you're automatically going into the fence. Because I mean, there's nothing you can do once you get in the crumb. They're just worse than the slickest ice you could drive on.
I know that Springfield track seems like the fast way around is always right on that railing. If you can drive into one and just be smooth down to the railing, pick the throttle up, and stay right on that railing, that's on the
inside.
On the inside is usually the fastest way around.
Had to do that. You had to run both those racetracks that way. Yeah. You had to run around the rail, and we ran a heat race down at DuQuoin, and I was leading it, and I went into turn number 1, and Don White was behind me, and I let off, and all the water blew out of the radiator right up on the windshield, and I couldn't see anything. So I'm going down the backstretch trying to watch this guardrail running probably 110 miles an hour go up into the turn. I actually got up into the crumbs a little bit, and Don got by, but I hit that throttle, come off of the turn, and picked up speed, beat him back like, boy, was he ever hot. He was ticked. and stuff. But that's when they decided they were going to outlaw my car. Because, I mean, I blew by him, and I would have won 5 dirt races if I didn't have a heating problem. Because we were wicked fast on all of them. And
I remember one year at Springfield, you were just killing them, and it overheated.
Yeah.
Wow. How do you prepare for those kinds of races where you're on tracks that are all different? How do you prepare? Is it instinct? Is it just trial by fire? Do you get to practice on those tracks a little bit before the race?
Well, yeah, we get to practice, but it's funny. We were down to Springfield, and you catch the track just right, and it was just right, and I could throw that car in the sideways in the turn, and there was a guy filming, and I kept the nose pointed right at him, and just letting the car drift.
That's probably the best day of his life.
Yeah,
It's getting great.
And stuff, but Sal DeVella called me up and said something about wanting to know if it was okay if that guy had filmed that race and used my car. And it's because Sal was really impressed with what I did. But I used to practice in the snow, when I was a kid and, driving and stuff. I go for blocks sideways up the street, just horsing around and stuff. So I did that. But talk about practice, we had the motor part at Milwaukee, and we were lined up. The last man going, we was out there bolting the hood on and stuff. No practice or nothing. And I've been trying to get into the 33-second bracket and stuff. And a couple times I thought, boy, I'm going to get there, but 34. I run 2 laps in a row, 32.92. Identical lap. Wow. No practice.
Wow.
So, and a lot of guys were talking about that and stuff, but it's kind of like, once you do it, you do it. And a lot of guys practice miles and miles, and I couldn't afford to practice. One thing, I needed starting money, so I had to make sure the car didn't break to get cover a check I wrote before I left.
Wow. Do you have any other questions?
That's about all I had.
When people look back at this era, what do you want them to take away?
Just the fact that everybody worked hard, and we all had mutual respect for one another. I could go out and ask Don White a question. He'd tell me anything he knew. Raymond, of course, would tell me anything he knew. Ernie, he said, well, I got a couple boys racing. He wouldn't tell me nothing. I said, that's okay, I'll go find Raymond, which wasn't a big deal. And I understand him, But the other guys, Don come out once and set my front end because I'd heard about caster and camber, but I didn't know what it was, when I started racing. Because back in our jalopy days, and even with my Henry J, they had what's called straight axle in them, and instead of independent suspension and stuff. And then finally I learned what caster and camber was, started doing my own. But those guys were really good about that. But I think that everybody just needs to know that we all were racers, we all were friends. In fact, if you look through my book, we did a thing for Mike Shea, Raymond put it on, but it's full of Keokuk drivers. And everybody had mutual respect for one another. And it's neat that City of Christmas has the 7, actually, is there 7 in that? Maybe 8, because Darrell Bradley's in that. Like I said, everybody just had mutual respect for one another. And that's the thing. And I wish everybody would go away knowing that Jesus was their Savior. And I hope that the years with that on there helped somebody along the road. And I'm on Facebook a lot, and I post a lot of religious stuff on there. And I've seen people on there that started with a little bad language 5 years ago are praising the Lord now. Mm-hmm. So it makes me feel good to be a servant of the highest there is.
Thank you for your time.
Well, you're welcome. Thanks for letting me do this.
I have one last question, but I'm going to edit back.
Okay.
Sponsorships. Did you have any sponsorships?
Well, no. Actually, when you look in this book, you'll see a picture of that was on the front page of Stock Car Racing magazine, and it says the best sponsor of all, and that picture of my car with Jesus Saves on it, and that was pretty much it.
Did you ever have any prize money?
Pardon me?
If you won the race, was there prize money involved?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it was helpful. Like, I know it wasn't your full-time job, but it was...
Well, it pretty much was for
It was your second full-time job, right?
No, it was
or
my
it was
full-time
just what you
job
did? Okay.
For several years, yeah.
And was it enough to hold everybody over?
I say full-time job during the summer.
Yeah. Then
I worked on cars, somewhat.
Yeah.
But we spent a lot of lazy time in the wintertime. That's why I got 2 kids.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
So your winnings would tide you guys over for the winter, and then you'd be doing some mechanic things here and there.
Yeah.
Got it.
Well, then in, 77 or 8, no, it wasn't either 75, I went to work for her dad's construction company. And I worked there for 7 years. And then I decided that I just wanted to be on my own. And I only had one boss then, that was my wife. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much, Gordy. It's been wonderful.